I'd invite you to stand and join me in the pledge, and then I'll bring the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time together. We thank you, Lord, for this city council, for these residents that are here tonight, for this city. God, I thank you for the work that you've given us to do, and we just seek you tonight in every decision that's made, that it'll be a decision that pleases you and is best for our community. And we ask these things and trust you for them now in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. I will again welcome you to tonight's regular meeting of the Springdale City Council. This is Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. And we do have large print versions of the agenda, don't we, Colby? Do we have them up there? Colby's got them if anybody needs them. And with that said, I'll ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Sprouse.
Here.
Brian Powell.
Here.
Amelia Williams.
Here.
Jeff White. Mike Overton.
Here.
Mike Lawson.
Here.
Kevin Flores.
Here.
Randall Harriman.
Here.
Mark Fujarus. Ernest Kate.
Here. All right. Thank you. And we do have a quorum. We have one council member, Randall, is on Zoom, and Mark Fujarus is also traveling, and he's going to try and join if he can. So you guys make sure we notice if he gets on. So Denise will know when to add him in, and we'll take care of that. We're at item 5 on your agenda. This is the portion of each council meeting that the council sets aside to hear comments from our residents. If we have citizens that would like to address the council, we ask that you go to the microphone, clearly state your name and address. Please keep your comments brief and understand that the council won't be taking action on anything you have to say tonight. So is there anyone that would like to address the council concerning an item that is not already on tonight's agenda? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Stu Larrabee. I drive a taxi in the city of Fayetteville, Springdale, Northwest Arkansas. Some observations about some extremely dangerous road conditions that need serious attention. Don Tyson, west side of it, where it goes from undivided to divided. It drops down, jogs to the right, and there have been many trees over and over that get taken out in the planter by cars going straight through, take out a tree, end up on the wrong side of the road. There's a clock on this before a car goes across and head on into another vehicle, and there's a bunch of dead bodies. Now, if anybody drives out there right now and you start getting out by, I'm just gonna say the area of like 40th, 48th out in that area, you're gonna see some trees that have been sawed off and they're only about sticking up about this high off the grass. Stick a lawn chair out there and sit there for 5 minutes and you'll be convinced that something has to be done, because I'm on Don Tyson 6-10 times a day. I see cars skimming the curb and stuff all the time, nighttime. Opposite end of Don Tyson on the east side also has a similar jog, not nearly as devastating, but the one on the west side where it changes elevation and curve and everything at the same time needs some immediate barricades put up in the grass so that people are going westbound can see it. If they're texting or other stupid things, at least it's sticking up. They see something's happening, and you could save a life. Some type of barricade or something is going to have to go up there. It's just one of those designs that doesn't work too well, and the evidence would be your own records and how many trees you've sought down and had to replace. Other things, I come from California, Los Angeles, the land of graffiti, and I notice it's getting way out of hand here in certain areas. I can remember from the 1970s and the 1980s, one of the things that was at least out there determined and discussed is that when it gets painted over, the closer you can get to a color match of the wall where it's at, the better off you are in not having it repeated. Some of it stands out if we had a wall here and some of these panels had graffiti on them and it gets painted a color that's so obviously like almost 180 degrees or even 90 degrees out of from where the original color was. It's like an invitation for it. I don't know what the problem is on getting the right paint to go cover it up at least close enough. And if it's like a couple letters and we're jogging down, we make all this zigzagging motion with paint covering up the graffiti. Is it really that much more just to paint the whole section of wall and be done with it and make it clean? And putting up some cameras in certain areas to catch the people that keep coming back to the same spots over and over and over and over again. That equipment is cheap. Game camera could do the job in a lot of aspects up on a pole attached to, uh, up on a pole, the height where Cox Cable runs their lines, it was just like a piece of their equipment. And at least a lot of this could be eliminated. But some of it is a big invitation away, it gets painted. And I can remember previous studies from 40, 50 years ago that outlined that at least getting it all blend again to whatever it was, doesn't invite it quite as much. That's it, my comments, and have a good afternoon.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 6, and I'm gonna turn this over to our city attorney. Okay.
Thank you. Actually, I think we can do 6 and 7 together. Items 14 and 15 are both ordinances vacating portions of public streets. One of them being Putnam Street from Price to Huntsville, the other being Blair Street from Price to Huntsville. The ordinance, or the statute, requires that before the ordinances can be considered, public hearing has to be held. City clerk has published notice of the public hearing is required by statute. So is there anyone here that wishes to be heard on either one of these ordinances? If not, we'll close the public hearings and take up those items later in the agenda.
All right, thank you, Ernest. Item 8 is approval of minutes. Council, you've had an opportunity to look the minutes over. If there are no changes or additions, I'd entertain a motion to approve them as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oh, thank you, Randall. Sorry, get ahead of you. I forget that delay sometimes. All opposed, same sign? All right, minutes are approved. Item 9, procedural motions. What's your pleasure, council?
I move that all ordinances and resolutions be read by title only.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
And B,
Mike, does your motion include B?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that's for A and B. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Overton,
Yes.
Lawson. Flores.
Yes, ma'am.
Perryman,
Yes, ma'am.
Powell,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Watson.
carry 7-0.
All right, thank you. And we're at item 10, Finance Committee report and recommendations. Chairman Jeff Watson.
Thank you,
Jeff?
Mayor. The Finance Committee met last Monday night, week ago Monday, and forwarded 6 items to the council. First item is 10A, having to do with the 2022 street overlay project. I'll read the title to that resolution. A resolution authorizing the execution of a contract for the City of Springdale 2022 street overlay project. This is to execute contract with APAC, and the committee forwarded this resolution to council with recommendation for approval.
Okay. Anything to add, Colby?
Nothing passed last Monday. If I can answer any questions about it. Well, this saved us about $800,000 by rejecting the first bid and going back out to bid and allowing other companies to bid on this. So it's going to be a good savings to the city.
I'll make a motion the resolution pass.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any other comments or questions? Anybody in the room? Okay, Denise?
Lawson. Flores.
Yes, ma'am.
Perryman,
Yes, ma'am.
Powell.
Yes.
Williams. Watson.
Yes.
Overton.
Yes.
Carry 7-0.
The second item, 10B, has to do with the acquisition of some property for the Dean's Trail portion of the trail project, and this is for some additional funds to settle the acquisition. I'll read the title of that resolution. A resolution authorizing the expenditure of funds to acquire a portion of land from Basic Block and Brick 1 LLC for the Dean's Trail Phase 3A project, project number ST1802. This resolution was forwarded to council with recommendation for approval.
Move resolution pass.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any other questions or comments? Anyone in the room? All right, Denise?
Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Howe,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Watson,
Yes.
Overton.
Yes.
Lawson.
Yes, ma'am.
Carries 7-0.
Third item has to do with the expenditure of ARPA funds. I'll let you or Mayor, you or Colby address this, but this resolution was also forwarded to council with recommendation for approval for the expenditure of something over $4.5 million of ARPA funds. The title of this resolution is a resolution to authorize the provision of government services for the citizens of Springdale, Arkansas from the American Rescue Plan Act, parentheses, ARPA funds.
Council, this has to do with the American Rescue Plan funds. As you'll remember, we had $10.6 million come in the first tranche from the federal government directly to the city. Of that 10.6 million, we were able to calculate that 9.194 million was lost revenue to the city. That's based on the calculation given to us from the U.S. Treasury. Of that lost revenue, we're able to use some of that funding to go towards reimbursement of first responder salaries. And that amount totaled $4,525,000, as you see in the resolution there. So that money that is reimbursing the city for the first responder salary will move from the lost revenue into the city's general fund. And it releases it from all restrictions concerning ARPA.
So that will be a savings to the budget.
It will.
That it would be a savings to the budget.
Essentially what this will do, you have about 17 million in your unrestricted general fund, which I know you like to call it general fund, but it's
It
the
is
unrestricted general fund. And this will add this amount on top of that. So currently you have about 17 million in there.
And this is Colby, this is something we can add to over time.
That's correct.
Also, if the council chooses to.
Yeah, this is a calculation for last year, so every year we'll be able to go back based on a new updated calculation from the U.S. Treasury and reallocate funding. It won't be near this much in future years, but it's probably going to be around $1 million next year,
How many years will this continue?
till 2026.
Thank you, Sugar Daddy.
Sure.
So we got the 1.5 that was restricted, right? That we couldn't classify as lost revenue.
Yeah, that's just going to stay in the regular ARPA
Have
fund.
we allocated that at all? It's just been a while. So I'm just trying to get a refresher.
We have not allocated anything out of just regular ARPA funding, and
Okay.
Cody's not here to give
Yeah.
you specifics, but that is still intact. In fact, some of the requests that we're going to be bringing before you will be used out of regular ARPA and not lost revenue.
Yeah, and so that first wave, which this would qualify, or that this would fall under, the 1.5, was that 2026 we have to spend it by, or was it 2024?
You have to allocate it by the end of December 31st of 2024, and then actually spend the money by December 31st of 2026.
Okay. And then the 4.5 that is lost revenue that we have, that's all going to non-restricted general fund, you said?
Well, you have 9 million, but of the 9, we're
Right,
going
right,
to be
but
taking the
after
4.5,
yeah.
and that will go into our general fund unrestricted.
Okay, all right.
Something that you didn't ask, but it brought up a good way to bring it up and just remind everybody is that since our lost revenue will be less out of this second tranche in the years going forward, we will have more restricted ARPA funds that we need to be sure and get obligated by the end of 2024.
So I move that this resolution pass.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions or comments? All right. Roll call.
Harriman,
Yes.
Howe,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Watson. Overton.
Yes.
Lawson. Flores.
Yes, ma'am.
Carries 7-0.
So the fourth item from the Finance Committee also has to do with the expenditure of lost revenue funds from the ARPA Act. And it's just over 600,000 for expenditure to modernize information technology infrastructure. The title of this resolution is a resolution to authorize the provision of government services for the citizens of Springdale, Arkansas from the American Rescue Plan Act, parentheses, ARPA funds. This resolution was forwarded to council with recommendation for approval.
Okay. Anything to add? IT, cybersecurity?
One of the four main pillars from the U.S. Treasury on spending American Rescue Plan funds was cybersecurity and broadband, and so this falls under that category. These are things we were going to need to be purchasing in the next few years as well for the city, and instead of it coming out of the general fund, we're able to use this out of the American Rescue Plan.
Move the resolution pass.
Got a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any other comments or questions? Anybody? Okay, Denise?
Powell,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Watson,
Yes.
Overton.
Yes.
Lawson. Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman.
Yes, ma'am.
Carry 7-0.
The fifth item has to do with superseding a previous resolution that we had passed earlier in the year on expenditure of a grant for upskill NWA and Northwest Technical Institute. And I'll ask the mayor or Kobe to also address this one to explain this. The title to this resolution is a resolution to authorize a sub-award to upskill NWA and Northwest Technical Institute from the City of Springdale's American Rescue Plan Act, parentheses ARPA funds, to help fund a job training and workforce development program. This resolution was forwarded to council with recommendation for approval.
This is going to be, as Jeff said, superseding a previous resolution. Cody had told me this morning at our staff meeting that they just went to Austin, Texas, and everybody was asking us how we're doing, what we're doing. Everybody else is about to get slapped on the wrist. So this is a protective measure to redo a previous resolution. As you remember, we have allocated $2 million to go to Northwest Technical Institute. And Upskill made the presentation that they would provide the programming, and if we could help with the facilities of Northwest Technical Institute, we'd be able to partner those together. However, since that resolution was approved by the city, Upskill wants to ensure that they are not held liable for the federal procurement guidelines from Northwest Technical Institute in the construction of the building. They wanted to separate those, so we had to rewrite this. We're still allocating $2 million to Northwest Technical Institute, and we're allocating
I think it's
$590,000 to Upskill for programming. If you remember, it was 2.89. The balance of that will go towards NWAC and their nursing program through Upskill at a future date.
Kobe, is that for RNs or is it for LPNs and CNAs?
I am not a
LPNs and
professional.
CNAs. Yeah, that'll be NWTI's part.
Yeah, that's what I understood, and that's why I think it's important people understand
Yeah.
Yeah.
that
Of
this
all the,
program is not for RN.
yeah, the RNs, I believe, is going to be done at Northwest
NWAC.
Community College. That's
Right.
correct.
And we hope, I'm sorry, Amelia, we hope to bring an NWAC agreement later.
Thank you.
All right? Entertain a motion.
I make a motion the resolution pass.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Anyone? Okay, Denise?
Williams,
Yes.
Watson,
Yes.
Overton.
Yes.
Lawson. Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman.
Yes, ma'am.
Powell.
Yes.
Carry 7-0.
Finally, the sixth item, resolution has to do with expressing our willingness to apply for funding for extension of the Don Tyson Parkway from Jean George Boulevard to Highway 112. This resolution was forwarded to council with recommendation for approval. The title to this resolution is a resolution expressing the willingness of the city of Springdale to apply for STBGPA funding for construction of Don Tyson Parkway from Jean George Boulevard to Highway 112.
Move the resolution pass.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any other comments or questions? Anyone? Okay, Denise?
Watson,
Yes.
Overton,
Yes.
Lawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Howe,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Carry 7-0.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Well, now we'll move on to item 11, Parks and Rec Committee Report and Recommendations, Chairman Mike Lawson. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. We had one item before us last week. It's a opportunity to apply for a grant for Murphy Park for playground equipment. I think the amount was around 400,000. It's a matching grant. I'll read the resolution. It's a resolution expressing the willingness of the city of Springdale to apply for state grant funding for the remodeling of playground at Murphy Park, and it was recommended for approval.
Mike, is that an 80-20 split?
50/50, I
50/50.
think. Matching grant.
So, and we don't have a firm price yet, Chad. We think it's gonna be around 400, but
Yeah, right now it's right at
yeah,
400,
it
but
could be more than that.
could
But
be
the
more by the time
grant
we
is,
actually, yes,
they would fund up to 250.
correct.
So if it's a $500,000 project or less, it'll be a 50/50 match.
Right.
If we're chosen, if we're selected.
Right.
And then, of course, we would come back to you all with that.
Move the resolution pass. Second.
Okay, we have a motion, and a second. Any further comments or questions? Okay, roll call, please.
Overton,
Yes.
Lawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Howe,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Watson,
Carry 7-0.
All right, thank you, Mike. Item 12, Personnel Committee and Chairman Mark Fujirus, and Mark's not on yet. Would someone want to take that?
I can take it.
Okay, Amelia?
Last week, the Personnel Committee met, and we have a resolution before us amending the 22 budget of the Springdale Police Department, approving the reclassification of 911 emergency dispatch personnel, and it was forwarded with a recommendation for approval. Colby?
I'll be the DH tonight. Gina's not here, so basically what we're doing here is proposing for us, we did a pay scale adjustment with the approval of the council. It's going to amount to $77,000, a price not to exceed that amount. We don't think it's going to be anywhere near that because we do have so many open positions in dispatch right now. We looked at the initial starting pay for dispatch, and we were at the bottom of Northwest Arkansas, and we went from 32, I think there's 32 positions in dispatch down to 14. And some of them are leaving for more pay at other departments. So in order to stop the bleeding, we didn't want to wait till budget time. We wanted to go ahead and proceed with this and go ahead and build back up our dispatch.
And I believe it was mentioned that we do more training than surrounding areas, is that correct? And
Yeah.
that we, even with this increase, that we still have a couple of cities that are above us that
That's
have
right.
less training, so I think it's very important.
We do more training because we do all three disciplines here,
That's
and
right.
not every city does. We do fire, police, and EMS, dispatch ourselves for all of that.
I move the resolution pass.
Okay, got a motion, and a second. Any further comments or questions? Okay, Denise?
Lawson. Flores.
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Howe,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Watson. Overton,
Yes.
Carry 7-0.
All right. Thank you, Amelia, for taking that. Item 13, we had as committee of the whole, and I'm going to turn 13A over to our city attorney, Ernest.
This is, I'll go ahead and just read the title of the ordinance. It's an ordinance confirming a second amendment to an intermunicipal sewer agreement between the city of Springdale, Arkansas and the city of Lowell, Arkansas, and declaring an emergency. This was forwarded from the committee with no recommendation. There were representatives here from Springdale Water and the city of Lowell, and the engineer for city of Lowell at the committee meeting. And I don't know if they want to provide some background.
Thank you, Ernest. Before you today is, of course, a contract with the city of Lowell to basically purchase certain capacity in an existing line that goes from Lowell to Springdale, as well as participate in the construction of the rebuild of the Benton Farm lift station and its force main. There's calculation in there based on the capacity that they wish or desire to purchase to calculate that cost based on the actual bid. If you have any questions or anything like that, I'd be happy to field those for you. I believe Mr. Ward provided a letter and certain illustrations that help show you the area that's affected and the capacities that are being looked at in those areas.
So Rick, I read the email. I thought it was pretty good from Heath. So this is not going to cost the Springdale taxpayer any money.
No, sir, it will not cost the
And-
taxpayers any money.
And you guys are confident that this is not going to dig into our water capacity for our city?
It will, the remaining capacity will be about 2,000 gallons per minute, about 1,900, a little over 1,900 gallons per minute that would be reserved in that. You know, that has a capacity of, I mean, many thousand customers could be served by that. The area is defined. In the foreseeable future, I do not see any issues with respect to capacity.
Any other questions? Mayor Moore is here from Lowell, also their engineer. If there are any questions for them? Is there a motion?
So this will help out in the payment of that lift station. This will relieve Springdale.
Yes, sir.
Some payment on
The
that.
way the contract's structured, there is a necessity to rebuild the Benton Farm lift station and its force main for certain areas of Springdale. There's tremendous growth on the west side of town, and the utility will have to upgrade those facilities. In order to accommodate what Lowell has requested, those facilities will have to be enlarged. The way the contract is put together, they would pay their share based on capacity for that upgrade, based on the bid of that project. That's not, we don't have plans put together yet, completed. So they're not going to be paying for anything in Springdale, but they would pay for the upgrades necessary for Lowell.
Ernest, is
There
a
is certain economy of scale, but it's difficult to rationalize.
Ernest, is there a duration on this contract?
We already have an existing agreement with Lowell. I believe it's, is up in 2028. I believe we amended it in 2013, and I believe it extended it for another 15 years.
The original contract allowed for 24.1% of the capacity of the line that traverses through Springdale.
What happens in 2028 when the agreement runs out?
I'm not a lawyer. I don't know on that. I apologize.
Well, quite honestly, it's one of those things that quite normally something is renegotiated before the end of the contract. And I did note, you said that you didn't actually have you said that Lowell would be paying for the number that's in the contract's almost $2 million, if I'm reading this correctly.
They would be paying the current cost or the current value of the 24 that they desire to gain capacity. Of the improvements to the Benton Farm lift station and its force main, they would pay their upgrade cost of that based on the bid. There's a little formula in there, Ernest.
All right, is there any action on this tonight, council? All right, looks looks like there's no action to be taken tonight.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, guys. All right, letter B. And this will be the city attorney show.
The next item is a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to enter into an agreement with the city of Fayetteville concerning the water territory boundary between the two cities. The last time that the water territory boundary has been amended was in 2006. And then there's a map that is in your packet that shows the area. And Rick's here if you have any questions about the specifics of the change.
And this is something we've done frequently to accommodate our citizens to swap with Fayetteville and Springdale servicing different areas.
Yeah, we've done it both ways, haven't we?
Yes, sir.
Common sense approach. It was recommended from committee with recommendation for approval.
Move the resolution be adopted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. Oop, turn my mic on there. We have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Howe,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Watson,
Yes.
Overton,
Yes.
Lawson.
Yes, ma'am.
Carry 7-0. The next item is an ordinance vacating a portion of a dedicated public street known as Putman Street pursuant to Arkansas Code annotated section 14-301-301 et sec, declaring emergency for other purposes. This would vacate a portion of the right-of-way of Putman between Price and Huntsville Street as shown on page 34, the highlighted area in the packet.
Move the ordinance pass.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance. Any other comments or questions? Anyone in the room need to speak to this issue? Okay, Denise?
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Howe,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Watson,
Yes.
Overton,
Yes.
Lawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Let's have an emergency clause.
Move the emergency clause be adopted.
Second.
Howe, Williams,
Yes.
Watson,
Yes.
Overton,
Yes.
Lawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Both the ordinance emergency clause carry 7-0. Next item is similar. It's an ordinance vacating a portion of a dedicated public street known as Blair Street pursuant to Arkansas Code annotated 14-301-301 et sec, declaring emergency and for other purposes. Back in the early 90s, Blair Street between Price and Johnson was vacated. It's where the Methodist Church is now. And they're seeking to vacate the portion between Price and Huntsville.
Move the ordinance pass.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance. Any other questions or comments? Does anybody in the room need to speak to this? All right,
Williams,
Yes.
Watson,
Yes.
Overton.
Yes.
Lawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Howe,
Yes. Move the emergency clause be adopted.
Second.
Watson,
Yes.
Overton.
Yes.
Lawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Flores.
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Howe,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Both the ordinance emergency clause carry 7-0, sorry. And then the item 16, this was, there was a public hearing held at Planning Commission last week as required by statute and by ordinance. This also came to Ordinance Committee, just to give you all a heads up that this was coming. This is an ordinance amending Article 4 and Article 5 of the zoning ordinance of the city of Springdale, Arkansas, declaring emergency for other purposes. It creates a use unit for transitional housing that would be a conditional use in a C2, C4, and C5 zones.
I will make a motion that the ordinance pass.
Second.
okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance. Any other questions or comments? Anyone?
Overton,
Yes.
Lawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Howe,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Watson,
Yes.
As emergency.
I make a motion the emergency clause pass.
Second.
Lawson,
Yes,
Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Hal,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Watson, Overton.
Yes.
Both the ordinance emergency clause carry 7-0. And the last item on the agenda is, I'll go ahead and read the title of the ordinance and I'll give a little background. You'll probably remember. It's an ordinance amending ordinance number 3307, the same being the zoning ordinance of the city of Springdale, Arkansas, and the plat pertaining thereto by rezoning certain lands from agricultural district A1 to planned unit development PUD and declaring an emergency. This is an 8-lot PUD located at 8915 East Brown Road. The planning commission had turned down the rezoning request. The property owner appealed to city council, and at the last meeting, the council voted 6-2 to overturn the planning commission's decision. So an ordinance has been brought forward to rezone the property. And just since the last meeting, there were several comments. I think Mr. Watson's term was tweaks that needed to be made to the development plan and the covenants. There were several comments that were relayed from the city to the developer. All of those comments were clarified or revised or addressed. And I think Patsy's here. That kind of, I think, gets us up to where we are tonight, I believe. So I've read the title of the ordinance.
So is the next order of business for Patsy to read all that?
I think the council needs to know what the proposal is.
Yes.
All the stuff. Okay.
Would it be better, well, you're gonna have to read it anyway. So
Yes.
I didn't
Do you
know
wanna
if, I didn't know if maybe we could highlight, either you or Larry could highlight for the council, maybe some of the specific changes. Or if while you're reading it, if you could point out,
I will just go through this as we go through it.
okay,
Because I think we addressed most of the tweaks. There's just 2 or 3 things left.
okay,
The issue of the waiver of detention and the waiver of street improvements are still the 2 issues that need to be taken care
all
of.
right,
Okay?
thank you.
So this is a PUD that is being proposed, and the property is owned by Scout Enterprises LLC. It is a 9.65 acre tract. The subdivision improvements will be done at one time as a single stage. No future stages of the subdivision are proposed. Once the improvements are installed and the final plat is approved by the city and recorded, construction of homes may begin. There are 8 lots, which will be constructed at various times. It is the developer's intent to construct home on all 8 lots within 5 years of the commencement of construction, but no definite time frame for the construction of all 8 homes can be established at this time, as the supply of suitable existing structures varies. In the initial construction, the only grading to be performed will be that needed to install the roadway and required utilities. Home sites will be graded as needed. In order to minimize impact on the environment, no mass grading is proposed. This is in keeping with the best management practices for the Karst area and will greatly reduce not only the amount of land disturbance, but also the amount of soil exposed at any given time. They are proposing to move existing homes into this subdivision. Their rationale for that is that existing homes represent a significant source of scarce and expensive building materials. Conventional demolition of existing homes not only wastes this resource, but also uses up increasing rare landfill space. A more environmentally friendly solution is to reuse these resources wisely by moving existing homes onto new home sites, where the homes may be remodeled and updated to meet current styles and building codes. It's the intent of the developer to locate existing wood-framed or steel-framed structures which cannot remain on their current sites, move these structures to the subdivision, and remodel them in accordance with applicable state and local residential building codes. The interiors and exteriors of homes will be remodeled to bring them up to date, and the homes will then be offered for sale or rent at the discretion of the developer. During the process, the exterior finishes of the homes were remodeled or replaced as needed within 9 months of the home's arrival on the site. This applies to external building finishes only and does not apply to items like fences, landscaping, etc. The requirement of the Springdale Code of Ordinances 22-32 shall be met with the prescribed 90-day timeline with any extensions that are granted in accordance with the ordinance. And what that means is it has to be brought in, put on a permanent foundation, and utilities have to be established, have to be hooked up to it within 90 days, or they have to get an extension from the building inspection. From the time of its arrival on the site, each home should be completely remodeled inside and out in approximately 12 months, barring circumstances beyond the developer's control. The developer is reserving the right to construct new homes in a conventional manner. The developer reserves the right to retain possession of all lots or to sell any or all of the lots prior to or after construction of a home on said lots upon completion of the final plat in accordance with applicable laws. Can't transfer any of the title until the final plat has been approved and filed. Should any lot be sold with home construction or renovation underway, either new construction or move-in, all applicable timelines for city ordinance and/or documents and/or the covenants shall be binding on the purchaser. And that's one of the things that we asked to be put into this. One of the tweaks is to make sure that if the property, if it is sold before that time frame is up, will it be, everything will transfer. We're not starting over with a new time frame in that 9 months to 12 months thing. The owner intends to begin construction as soon as the required approvals are obtained. Construction on the homes on the lot cannot begin until the final plat is approved. We've been through several meetings with the developer and their engineer, with city staff, with the planning commission through work sessions and all that to get to this point as required. And I'm highlighting some of this. There's lots of words in between, but it's just explanation for some of the things I'm giving to you. The preliminary plat that is required as part of the PUD, which is all adopted at the same time, is shown to have all lots will have a minimum setback of 30 feet in front, 8 feet on the sides, and 20 feet in the rear. No maximum setbacks are established. These are similar to the setbacks that are identified in an SF1 zone. A single residential street will connect to East Brown Road through a 50-foot right-of-way and will pass through the middle of the site, ending in a cul-de-sac. All lots will have access from the street and only from the street. The street within the bulk of the subdivision will have a paved surface of 24 feet in width with gravel shoulders, 4 feet in width on each side, as allowed under Springdale Code Section 112-4 in an estate subdivision. That regulation indicates that that's a street standard that may be used for estate lots, which it identifies that it should have a stabilized shoulder at least 4 feet wide and a sodded drainage swell at least 5 feet wide and 12 inches deep with a slope of 3-to-1 on the street side and at least 2-to-1 on the other side. They're proposing that it would only have the shoulder in gravel, but not the swells on the side.
Not the what?
Not the swells on each side. The street section north of lots 1 and 8, at the request of the Public Works Director, will have the shoulders covered in sod instead of gravel to reduce transportation of gravel downstream in extreme events. In an effort to minimize runoff, gravel driveways and off-street parking will be used on each house. There will be no paved parking areas or driveways for any of the homes to be built on these lots. The reasoning behind that is to minimize and use an LID in the preservation of natural vegetation and natural drainage facilities. Exact placement of the homes on individual lots cannot be determined at this time, in part to the fact that existing homes are proposed for upcycling as they become available, and neither their dimensions nor the exact floor area is known at this time. The project will consist of a common area, 2 acres of open pasture with some shade trees is proposed along the southern boundary of the site and is 100 feet in width. They're proposing an outdoor grill and picnic tables placed on the west end of the common area where existing large trees will provide shade. This common area is covered by a water main easement in favor of Beaver Water District, and no permanent structures may be placed within the easement. The remainder of the site shall remain open and will provide space for soccer, football, horseshoes, foot races, family fun, picnics, and other similar recreational activities. And that's shown on the plat that was attached with the rezoning request. The common area will be mowed and maintained by the POA. Grassed areas that are within the right-of-way and adjacent to residential lots that are part of Hawksview subdivision shall be kept free from tall grass, weeds, debris, and other gross articles and things by the occupant of said lot in accordance with city ordinance. The right-of-way of Hawksview Drive, where it is not adjacent to any lot of Hawksview subdivision from Brown Road southward to the north lines of Lot 1 and 8, shall be kept free from tall grass, weeds, debris, and other gross articles and things by the POA. This is one of the other areas about who is going to maintain that additional area outside the street construction for those areas. The areas will be maintained by the POA, rather than if it's dedicated as a city street, the city wouldn't have to maintain those areas outside of the shoulders, which will be grass in this case, will be maintained by the POA. Okay? The 8 lots vary in sizes. Lots 1, 7, and 8 will be approximately 1 acre in size. Lot 2 will contain approximately 0.8 acres. Lot 3 through 5 will contain approximately 0.5 acres. Lot 6 will contain approximately 0.9 acres. And Lot 9 will contain the common area, which is adjacent to lots 2 through 6, and there will be direct access to the smaller lots. Lots will front on a 2-lane public street. And I already told you the street will be constructed without curbs and gutters, but have a 4-foot gravel shoulder within the bulk of the subdivision as allowed in ordinance in the city's code as in a state subdivision. Talked about the change in that of those existing to have landscaping rather than gravel. Mitigation for the subdivision, which brings up the issue of the waiver of detention, is proposed by the use of runoff catchment basins commonly referred to as rain barrels on each structure. While not specifically approved by the Springdale LID manual, these devices are recognized by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Information and general design for the proposed system will be submitted to and reviewed by Springdale's engineering department. So at this time, it hasn't been evaluated with the calculations or the details. This document says it is our understanding that the general concept has been considered appropriate for runoff mitigation by the engineering department. In addition, the developer proposes to install water-absorbing vegetation around the foundation of each permanent structure to further reduce runoff. And I don't see anywhere in there that there is a definition of what is a water-absorbing vegetation, and that may be an engineering question, not one for me. The covenants require that the rain barrels and the vegetation be maintained in perpetuity by the owner occupant, and that vegetation may not be changed to another type. And since we don't know the type, I don't know how we take care of that one just yet. In addition, the natural flow of runoff in a broad dispersed pattern will have significantly less impact on surrounding landowners than a concentrated point discharge where runoff from the entire site would be funneled onto one owner's property. The permitted use in this PUD will be Use Unit 1, citywide public uses by right. Use Unit 8, which is single-family dwellings. Use Unit 29, which is a home office. Conditional uses will be limited to Use Unit 2, citywide uses by conditional use permit, and Unit 3, which are utility facilities. They are proposing the allowance for accessory structures, accessory buildings, including private garages, storage facilities, gazebos, pergolas, and children's playhouses, which are similar in most residential districts, private greenhouses and horticultural collections, porches, awnings, screen rooms, sunrooms, and pool enclosures, flower and vegetable gardens, swimming pools, tennis courts, and other similar recreation facilities shall be permitted on lots with the area exceeding 0.7 acre, which is 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, and 9, but not smaller lots 3, 4, or 5 due to site limitations. With the exception of flower and vegetable gardens, none of the above accessory uses shall encroach on building setbacks, utility easements, or septic systems, including primary and alternate drainage fields as shown on the plat, or as determined by the designated representative for each lot, whichever restriction is greater. Exterior finishes for accessory buildings shall conform to the requirements listed in the development plan for dwellings. And I wasn't able to find the development plan for dwellings as a separate item in here, but it is included in the covenants. Lots 3 through 5, the total area of all accessory buildings should not exceed 2,000 square feet. Lots 1, 2, 6, and 7, and 8, the total area for the accessory buildings, greenhouses, swimming pools, and similar recreational facilities shall not exceed 2,000 square feet, except that the lot owner may petition the Architectural Review Committee for an additional area of up to 2,000 square feet, or a total of 4,000 square feet, which may be approved or denied at the sole discretion of the ARC. That was one of the issues that we asked them to address. The only thing that's in here that's not been addressed is the height of the accessory structures and whether it can be taller than the primary structure, and it's not addressed in here. No building hereafter erected or structurally altered shall exceed a height of 2 stories. No lot shall be less than 0.47 acres. There has to be a minimum lot width of not less than 100 feet on a public street at the front setback line, and that's how you meet the requirements of the estate lots. The proposed density is 8 residential lots plus 1 2-acre, which creates a density of 1.21, 1 residential lot per 1.21 acres. I told you about the front setbacks, 30 fronts. If there is a corner lot, in keeping with the definition of a corner lot, all sides adjacent to streets shall be required to have front setbacks of 30 feet. Side setbacks shall be 8 feet, and rear setbacks are set at 20. Off-street parking shall be provided in accordance with Chapter 7, except that neither residential driveways nor provided parking spaces shall be covered with an impervious surface. Driveways and off-street parking spaces shall be surfaced with crushed stone aggregate base and shall be regularly maintained by the occupant and/or landlord so that the surface is firm, stable, and usable, and must remain free of ruts, grass, weed, and other vegetation. There again, that's one of the tweaks that we asked to make sure that the driveways are maintained. If otherwise, surface driveways and off-street parking shall be covered with pervious materials as approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Nothing in this order shall supersede the applicable requirements of the American with Disabilities Act or the Fair Housing Act. My only question is, if they're allowed to put in pervious surfaces for the driveways and parking, what does that do to the calculations of the drainage? Because right now we're calculating based on none of that happening. The street construction standards, we've kind of been over that a couple of times. No concentration of runoff is proposed. No curb and gutter. So we have a 24-foot street in width, unless noted otherwise, is needed to provide areas for fire suppression apparatus. A 4-foot gravel shoulder will be provided adjacent to internal streets with the exception that the Public Works Director asked for. Roadside ditches shall not be provided as sheet flow is to be maintained wherever possible. And this goes through that again. I'm not going to outline it all again. You'll remember.
Patsy, is that a public or a private street?
They're proposing it to be a public street. The minimum heated floor area for homes within the subdivision is 1,000 square feet. The maximum allowable heated area is 4,000 square feet per home. Homes are limited to a maximum of 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms due to the constraint of the proposed septic systems. And that's what the septic system approvals that they got from the health department indicates that's the number of bedrooms that they can have. Due to the inclusion of common areas, the lots vary in sizes, and we talked about that. I have not seen anything that creates an issue with the health department. I'm assuming because those all back to common areas, it doesn't affect any of that, but we don't have any of that information. Exterior finishes for accessory buildings should be the same as the development plan for dwellings, and here again, it's referred to again, and it's not actually included in the document. It is in the covenants. The covenants that are part of this, it looks like a standard declaration of covenants of assurance and restrictions of Oxview plan development to the city of Springdale, Arkansas. We asked that the city be made a party to the covenants, and their attorney indicated that that's not normally how that's done, but the city has the right to enforce the covenants with some language that's added to the document, and that's something Ernest has to address, not me.
Has that been done?
Yes.
Ernest, okay. Okay. It establishes an association board membership based on, until all lots are sold by the developer to third parties, the board shall consist solely of members appointed and determined by the developer, and the developers reserves the right in its sole discretion to appoint and remove members of the board for any reason. There is an amendment process. I'm not going through all the details of what this has in it. Restrictions on residential lots as part of the covenant. Fences shall be constructed of wood, metal, PVC, or other similarly approved materials. All privacy fences shall be constructed so that the framing shall be toward the inside of the owner's lot and shall be constructed at a height of 6 feet to minimum uniformity, to maintain uniformity. All fence, when constructed, must be maintained by the property owner who had it constructed or their successors in interest. There should be an access gate upon each of said approved fences for the purpose of allowing utility personnel and other public employees access to the lots. The covenants state no noxious or offensive activities or nuisances are permitted. No animals should be kept or maintained on the lot except the usual household pets. And that was one of the areas that we had talked about, because before it had hobby chickens, hobby rabbits, and bees. So all that is just typical household pets. They're required to have garbage service, but that's something the city already requires. No access to any lot from the perimeter except from the designated roads. No communication, mast, tower, or structure may be installed on any lot, except that satellite dishes may be installed only on the rear roof of the dwelling and shall not exceed the height of the lowest roof ridge line of such dwelling. Owners have to provide sufficient off-street parking to accommodate the vehicles. No vehicles may be parked in front yard at any time. Similarly, there will be no parking on any gravel or sod roadway shoulders in the development, and I think that's one of the ones we wanted the language cleared up on that. No trailer, mobile home, tent, shack, or other unsightly building or structure, temporary or permanent, shall be erected on said or used on said lots. However, it's permissible to have a storage building in the rear or side yard of a dwelling, provided that the plans are submitted to the association ARC for its approval. Now, the question becomes, is that one of the accessory uses if it is a storage building, or does that count in the full 2,000? And it's not clear in here of the accessory uses whether that's included in that. Recreation and camping vehicles, trailers, and tracks may not be stored or parked on the lots except behind the dwelling. On lots with two fronts, recreational vehicles and boats shall be kept behind the dwelling as viewed from the front of the dwelling approved by the ARC. Again, the minimum lot sizes or the minimum square footage is minimum of 1,000, maximum of 4,000. And the 3-bedroom, 2-bath design can only have single-family dwellings. Garages are not required. Developer reserves the right to review and approve garages that are both attached and unattached. No garage opening shall be taller than 20 feet. Non-attached garages shall be reviewed and approved by the ARC. Again, our other accessory structures have that same height limitation, and pool houses and those kind of things, it's not real clear how that is. They have a procedure on how the ARC is to review what has to be submitted to them and review to them. And it also states in here that no building permit will be issued until the ARC has approved the plan. So we don't get ahead of the ARC. This is the only place where it says all exterior walls of all dwellings constructed or moved on the lot shall be finished with brick, stone, fake stone veneer, construction, or concrete composition siding such as hardy siding, vinyl, wood, or metal siding. Dormers or gables may be covered with any of the materials or vinyl siding. Soffits and fascia may be covered with steel, aluminum, PVC, or concrete composition materials. Roofs shall be covered with shingles using architectural composition or better. All street-facing front elevations for corner lots, windows may be true light or divided light. All replacement windows must be approved by the ARC. Any colored decorative glass on street-facing elevations may be approved by the ARC. And this would be the same material that is allowed on the accessory structures. The only question I have is metal roofs allowed as a possibility of a roofing type, because it doesn't address that. All lots shall be maintained, mowed, and kept free of noxious weeds, whether they are improved or unimproved. It has a provision that if the owner allows the grass to grow such that it's more than 8 inches high The developer or the association shall have the right but not the obligation to have it mowed without giving notice to the owner and shall charge a $75 service charge for arranging the mower in addition to the amount it costs developer association to have it mowed. All lots must include design criteria sufficient to reduce runoff and adhere to the best management practice of the Karst recharge area. I'm not exactly sure what that statement means, but it's there. Landscaping shall be installed in accordance with the best management practice for the Karst. Proposed changes to the landscaping and shall alter, okay, let me back up. Proposed changes to the landscaping that shall affect or alter more than 10% of the lot must be reviewed by the ARC. Owner is responsible for the maintenance of all LID techniques used, including but not limited to the maintenance of rain barrels, guttering plants, and driveways. Plants that die must be replaced with similar plants. This is in keeping with the BMPs for the Karst and LID requirements that are unique to the subdivision. It doesn't say when the landscaping has to be installed. That's not part of the original, the landscaping and the fencing was not part of that original discussion. They're all platted lots with easements for fences and entry signs. No person is required to register as a sex offender can reside in this. These covenants shall run with the land for a 30-year period, and the only note I have here is if there's an alteration after 30 years, the council has to be involved. I'm not going to be here to manage that. Somebody else will have to do that. It's not going to be me. All driveways and parking areas for vehicular use on the lot shall have a base of compacted gravel, crushed stone, or other approved base material. And I'm assuming the ARC would approve that base material. It doesn't say who approves a different other. Lot owners are responsible for the maintenance of driveways and yards maintained around driveways. Driveways and off-street parking shall be surfaced with crushed stone. We say it again. There is a section in this that sets up how the association is to be formed, how it's creating liens, what the purpose of the assessments. The initial assessment for each lot will be $200. I can read you all those details, but I didn't think that was necessary. They do have the ability to set up special assessments for capital improvements that have to go through a process to be approved by the association. They identify what is a quorum for actions, what happens with late payment of assessments, the duties of the board of directors, the effective non-payment of assessments and lien remedies, the subordination of the lien or mortgage, the suspension of rights of membership, cancellation and hearing, powers and duties, liability limitations. They are establishing reserve funds, which may be maintained and accounted for separately from other funds maintained for annual operating expenses. The board shall establish and maintain a legal reserve fund that shall be initially funded with $2,500 from the developer. Additional amounts may be deposited to the fund at the discretion of the board. Sets up the procedure for establishing the ARC will be comprised of at least 2 and not more than 5 members who shall be natural persons. Initially, the ARC, and it sets out who those people will serve until their resignation and procedures for how they add people to the ARC. The function of the ARC, what the plans and specifications need to be for review. It establishes the rights involving common property and what each member will have the ability to use the common property. They have a section on violations of the covenants itself. A copy of the plat was included, and there is bylaws for the homeowners association or the property owners association, which are pretty standard. I'm not going to go through all those unless you just really want to hear that. So that's the highlights.
Yeah, Larry, you wanna, I know Patsy asked a couple of questions at least.
Can I ask Patsy some questions before she leaves the podium?
Sure.
So Patsy, I'm a little unclear on you were referring to it as a right-of-way from the development to Brown Road. Who owns that property?
Well, along Brown Road, they are required to dedicate the right-of-way in conformance with the master street plan.
Along Brown Road?
Right.
What about the road, what are they calling that drive?
Well, it doesn't have a name yet. They'll have
Okay.
to submit a name and get it
All
approved.
right, but
Does it have a name?
Why are you referring to that as a right-of-way, though?
Well, because they're dedicating it as a public street.
That from Brown Road up to the development is
From the
public street?
cul-de-sac all the way up to Brown Road, they're proposing it to dedicate it as a public street
Mhm.
with a street standard that is a 24-foot wide paved street with 4-foot gravel shoulders on both sides.
And Jeff, if I may, so Patsy, I'm looking at the minutes here. It seemed like you had an issue with that being a public street.
Well, I can tell you in the 25-plus years that I've been here, I don't know of a single time that we have approved as a city street, a street that has gravel shoulders. And that's something that would be new. Now, it is allowed as a possibility as an estate lot. We've done some subdivisions with estate lots. I don't know of anyone that's done this up to this point. Their reasoning for doing this is to address the Karst study area, and you'll have to get engineering to address that because I know enough engineering to be dangerous, but you don't want me answering those questions.
But aren't they modifying the gravel to sod now?
Part of it, just that portion which is not adjacent to a lot that a house will be on. It's that strip from the last lot all the way down to Browns Road.
Yeah. That's
So
what's-
that to mitigate the amount of gravel that gets washed down through there.
That's what's being modified from gravel to sod?
Right.
Okay. But still, the whole thing, the whole L would be a public street as is.
Right. And it's a 50-foot right-of-way with this constructed inside that.
Can you help me separate, because
If we could keep Patsy up there.
well,
Before Larry gets up.
this'll be maybe for Patsy. We talk about the Karst a lot, but would that strategy as an LID, low impact development strategy, would that be, I'm trying to separate or trying to get in my mind whether that would be all right anywhere or
Well-
whether it's all right because of the Karst, or is the Karst the reason that LID strategies are being proposed?
Okay, the subdivision regulations allow that street section in estate lots. There, and engineering's gonna have to discuss the Karst thing. I know
Okay.
a little bit about it. They're proposing it because it is in the Karst to address some of those issues.
Okay.
Okay?
So Patsy, before you leave, I'm just going back over some of the things
Okay.
you said. So
Okay.
I didn't quite understand when you were talking about engineering had not been done on something yet.
Well, it's my understanding that they are proposing rain barrels instead of detention. And I don't know that all the calculations and all of the design elements have been submitted to engineering, and you're gonna have to address that with engineering now.
All right, thank you.
Okay?
And again, one last thing, Pat, and I'm asking you and your expertise. The pros and cons of this being a city or a private street. Can you list?
Well, standing on this side of the table as a public servant, if it's a different kind of road that we've never maintained, so it's putting a different strain on the Public Works Department to maintain it, because they don't do it anyplace else.
What about the lack of sidewalks?
Well, they don't have sidewalks either.
And
they-
that's because of the drainage issues?
That's what they're proposing, to address it with no curb, no gutter, no sidewalks.
Well, you could,
You know me, I always am a proponent for sidewalks.
And they waived the 5-foot swales.
Right, they're not adding those to part of the project. Now, you gotta remember, this is 8 lots. This is not a subdivision, some of the sizes we looked at before. Makes it a little bit different because it's just 8 lots.
And we do waive sidewalks a lot when it's out like that.
We've done them for single lots. We haven't waived sidewalks completely for any subdivision that I know of. Thornberry, I think, is the last one that I know of that went in that didn't have sidewalks.
well, would they, what if one of the homeowners wanted to build sidewalks?
Well,
Is that
there
allowed?
we get into that issue that the drainage is established not to have those pervious
So is
surfaces.
there some prohibition in the PUD?
It
against
says the
sidewalks?
ARC has to approve those. That was my question. How many of these can we go to the point where it affects the drainage as it was designed? And I can't answer that question because I'm not an engineer. Okay?
And Larry, as you make your way up there, to be fair, I don't think we discussed sidewalks or the street being public or private, at least in detail last time. I'm thinking the reason was because this was such a big mess and we were just trying to discuss so much at once.
Thank you. I'm Larry McCready. I represent the developer. Let me first, I want to start since we're talking about the streets and the sidewalks. Keep in mind, as I explained last time, the overall plan here was to maintain natural drainage. Keep as little impervious surface, or put as little impervious surface on the grounds as was possible. So that's why there was no sidewalks. The street was designed asphalt with the gravel side, 4-foot shoulders, gravel shoulders. That was designed, the street standard, section 112-4 says that you need stabilized shoulders. Doesn't say gravel. We chose gravel because that was a stabilized surface. But it's still pervious, which will help with the drainage, it will help with the karst. That's how we ended up there. There isn't a prohibition not to build a sidewalk in there. Part of it is because the ARC is going to maintain this notion of their drainage in this subdivision because they don't want to impact the karst. You know, there's not prohibitions on everything that can't be built in there. So I think that the protection for the city is because the ARC is going to want to maintain the drainage plan that is in place as part of this PUD. In terms of dedicating it public or private, we had proposed dedicating it as a public street from the beginning. I don't want to say too broadly that tonight is the first night that I've heard from the city that they don't like that, but this is an issue that we had debated. We got feedback from the city. This is where we ended on. And there's two main points that I'm going to read from, but this is an email dated May 26. It's from Brad Baldwin to David Gilbert. On the issue of the street, this is what Mr. Baldwin told Mr. Gilbert, who is the developer's engineer. It says James, and I've got copies, anybody wants to see it, but it says James Smith, PW director, said he does not have an issue with the city accepting the street right away and the associated pavement maintenance responsibility. The proposed pavement section is good. However, he and I, meaning Brad and Mr. Smith, Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Smith, thought that the gravel shoulders on the north-south segment with no ditches will be a washing issue in heavy rain. Our concern is that gravel will wash to the bottom of the hill and clog the culvert at Brown Road. Our suggestion is to sod the shoulders rather than gravel with no ditches. POA will mow the right-of-way. We got this recommendation on May 26th and we incorporated it into the final plan that you have. So within that right-of-way, you've got the asphalt and then you will have grass up to the asphalt that will be the responsibility of the POA to maintain. This does not address the fact that when you get, so if you, and if you take a look in our submission, page 72 has a copy of the plat in case you want to see it, but there is a north-south section of this road that runs from Brown Road to the tract, the 10 acres itself, and then you've got that other street that's within the 10 acres. The street section within the 10 acres, it still has the gravel drive because that has been our proposal all along. We didn't change that because the recommendation from Mr. Baldwin didn't suggest changing that portion, so we left it. We fully recognize that maintaining 4 feet of gravel can be a pain, particularly in the Karst region. We all know what will happen to gravel over time. Grass, weeds will grow up through it. We're in the Karst region. Spraying some type of herbicide is probably not ideal in that. We are fine, just as we do in that one section as they recommend, bringing grass into that asphalt as well. We are not looking to burden the city with more difficult maintenance. We're relying on what the city said, that's saying that, hey, the street section looks good. We have no problem accepting the responsibility and accepting a dedication. So that's how we ended up where we are on the public versus private road. I just want to highlight a couple other of the more major modifications from the plan that we saw on May 24th to where we are tonight. And then I'm going to just try to briefly address some of the things that Patsy mentioned. Animals was a big issue. And as we said at the planning commission, we would remove that. So that's been removed. There's no chickens, no rabbits, nothing other than household pets, and they have to follow existing city ordinance for those. So that was an easy one to fix that we did. I've talked about the curb and gutter already and addressed how we ended up with no sidewalks in the shoulders that we did. Let me mention a little bit about sort of the outbuilding issue. The original plan had outbuildings permitted of 4,000 square feet. We cut that in half to 2,000 square feet. The primary reason to do that was to eliminate or to reduce the amount of impervious surface that would increase runoff. So in terms of, instead of 4,000 square foot maximum that you could have on each lot, it's now 2,000. Couple lots allow you to ask for another 2,000. That used to be 4,000. So anyway, the total size of accessory buildings has been cut in half on all the lots, and it was, again, to help reduce the amount of runoff. Patsy raised a question in her presentation that it was unclear the height of those, and maybe it is a little bit unclear, but the covenants made clear houses can be at most 2 stories high. The covenants make equally clear accessory buildings can only be 20 feet high. So I don't think you're going to get a 2-story building that's higher than or less than 20 feet. So your accessory buildings are going to be lower, smaller than what your structure is going to be. So I do think that is addressed in there. And those are in the covenants 4.21 versus 4.12. The other issue that has come up was the issue of these rain barrels as a runoff mitigation technique. They were referenced in the original plan, but they weren't mandated. So that's one of the other big changes we made in this updated plan is we required the use of rain barrels, and we wrote into the covenants that the homeowners have to maintain those rain barrels. So there is enforcement in there. And Jeff, to address your question about, this issue about the city being made a party to the covenants, Arkansas statute, I think it only allows the property owner to burden the land with covenants. So I don't think that's why we didn't include the city as a party, because I don't think it's consistent with Arkansas law. What we did do, and it's at the end of the covenants, is we specifically say the city of Springdale is given the authority to enforce these covenants. So you get to the same spot, slightly different technique. But the city is there to be able to help enforce that requirement that rain barrels be maintained. Let me read from this same email from Mr. Baldwin on May 26th about rain barrels. He said, "We have approved the use of rain barrels for runoff mitigation in the recent past, April of 2019. Copy of the previous calculations is attached. These are the calculations for rain barrels that were included in that 2019 project." I think this is important because we've talked about waivers of detention. Mr. Baldwin states, "Our drainage standards make provisions for mitigation methods other than detention ponds with quote, proper documentation." And this comes from section 5.4.5 of the Springdale Drainage Manual. So while no detention certainly is a bit unique, it is not in violation of any Springdale standard, because our whole drainage report and then the lid techniques that we maintain provides that proper documentation to show that drainage mitigation is in place. And then he says, per our discussion, you would make perpetual maintenance of rain barrels a part of the project, which we have done. Those are in the covenants. So I do think that we have addressed that, and we've addressed it consistent with the feedback that we got from engineering just 2 or 3 weeks ago. I will say the calculations for rain barrels have not been run yet. I think there's a disagreement. Mr. Gilbert had a discussion with Mr. Baldwin. He remembers Mr. Baldwin saying, "We don't need to perform those calculations with rain barrels right now." We will certainly do those. Frankly, we will also redo the drainage study with the smaller accessory buildings, because both of those techniques and that change with the accessory buildings as well as the rain barrels will greatly reduce the amount of runoff. And so I would submit that the drainage report that had the larger accessory buildings did not take into account any rain barrels, resulted in a negligible impact on runoff. When you include these techniques, it's going to make a negligible impact even more negligible. So it's going to decrease. It's not as if we were relying on these techniques in our original drainage report. We did not even include those, and we included a maximum size build out so that we could truly understand what a worst case scenario would be.
So just so I'm clear, because I remember that point being made very strongly at the last meeting. The accessory structures, the drainage report that David, you prepared or had prepared or prepared, the drainage report that showed an 1/8 of an inch sheet flow over that 600 and something.
Right. In a 100-year rain event.
In a 100-year rain event, factored in the full 4,000 square feet on accessory buildings.
On every lot.
And y'all are reducing that to no more than 2,000 except for 2 lots. Is that correct?
It may be a few more, but
Okay.
but the additional amount was halved as well. So rather on those lots that allowed some additional one, you could have up to 8,000 square feet of accessory buildings. That's been cut in half.
And the rain barrels weren't a part of that calculation either.
The rain barrels were not incorporated in that previous drainage study because as Mr. Gilbert explained last time, they're difficult to calculate depending on the maintenance of them.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
Mr.
Okay.
Baldwin shared some calculations from that one done in 2019. We didn't think they were needed at this point. We will certainly get them, but you can know this for certain. They will reduce the amount of runoff that is included in the drainage report.
Hey, Larry,
Yes, sir.
we've talked about the term accessory buildings quite a bit. Can we get a definition of accessory buildings, what they'll be used for?
The description, pardon?
So these accessory buildings, they will have to be separate from the household, the
Yes.
living household?
That's correct.
They're not intended to have living quarters in them?
No.
These, because from what I'm seeing is some of these accessory buildings could be the same size as the houses that are in there.
Correct. Some can be, but the lots are restricted to just single-family dwellings. The accessory buildings would be in addition to that, because you're moving them on, in many cases, there won't be a garage. And so people may want to have a garage, or they may want to have a storage building for a boat or something else like that. That is what the accessory buildings will be. I don't know where I think it's the development plan, though, in which the definition of accessory building is included.
I
So,
just wanted that to be clear.
yes, it will not be a second place where people can live. There were various other, I mean, when we redid these, we submitted them to planning, and I think as Ernest mentioned, we got comments back and we incorporated nearly everything. I don't want to say exactly, like, for example, the city is a party to the covenants. We did not incorporate that, but I think we got to the same point of, had they been a party to it, it's to allow the enforcement. We make that clear. The issue of septic systems and how those might, we got the approval for those before we had added the common area, but where we added the common area in this development is across the existing water easement from Beaver Water District. So the drawings and information we submitted to the health department did not go into that area because you have to keep it back from that easement because of the existing of that water transmission line. So the analysis the health department did of the septic systems would not have changed when we added the common area to the subdivision at the recommendation of a planning commission member. I think I've addressed most of the questions that Patsy brought up. Our intent all along has been to take the recommendations that the city staff has given us incorporate that. I think we've tried to do that. And I think that, you know, the result, as I've said before, is a unique subdivision that's sustainable, it's environmentally friendly, that's unique, and provides good-sized lots. All of that remains true. I mean, the developer's goal in this was to come up with some unique residential use of this property rather than the traditional agricultural use like a chicken house or something like that, which can be accomplished right now without the involvement in the oversight and enforcement that the city provides in a PUD like this. We think it's a good project. We ask that you approve it. We can, Mr. Gilbert, the engineer, is here, the developer's here. We can answer any questions that anybody has.
I think Patsy mentioned another question. I don't know that it matters one way or the other on, around most of the discussion, but metal roofs, you asked about that.
Well, I don't think it matters. What the covenant says is that the roofs shall be architectural shingles or better. Now, I think it's fair to say, some may say a metal roof's better than an architectural shingle, some will say it's worse. The way it is right now, it's left to the discretion of the ARC, but the standard is at least architectural shingle quality. And so, you know, if the pleasure is to further clarify that, to either allow or disallow it, I'm sure, you know, the developer would consider that and conform it to the will of the council.
The development plan says that there is a development plan for dwelling. I didn't see that. The only place the standards for exterior finishes is in the covenants itself. It's not in the development plan itself.
Okay, and I'm sure you're right. I think that both the development plan and the covenants are adopted. And it's only when there's a conflict between them that the development plan would control. And so I would say that the standards for exteriors and houses are contained in the covenants, but I don't know if that addresses the question or not. Okay.
Chief, I don't know if this is for you, but this being a subdivision, is there a fire control? What has to be, is there anything has to be added to this for emergency services for this being a subdivision?
I'm looking to my colleague for
I can
help.
answer that for you.
Okay.
That's why the pavement is 24 feet and the cul-de-sac at the end meets the fire requirements. Fire hydrants are set, all of that stuff has been looked at through the process. There weren't any issues with that left over. Unless Blake knows of something.
Hey, Patsy, on the height of the accessory buildings, is that not controlled by city ordinance?
Well, in most places, you know, it's a relative to the height of the structure that's there. In the form-based code, it's very specific. In some subdivisions, it's part of their covenants. I didn't see that. They said garage doors can't be higher than 20 feet.
I think it said garages can't be taller.
Okay, which addresses that issue. I'll have to go back and look at that. I missed that one.
But I mean, if we have a city ordinance on how tall an accessory building can be, this would not modify that, would it?
Well, they're setting their standards in this, and I don't know that we have a standard for how tall accessory buildings can be, except in the form-based code, I know.
We do.
You got one?
So does this change that, Ernest?
In a residential zone, the height restriction is 16 feet for permanent structure and 10 feet for portable.
Okay, is that same thing in a PUD? Because this is a PUD rezoning request, not a standard residential.
Is that the garage door height or is that the height of the garage?
It's the height of the garage.
The roof height.
10 feet.
16 feet.
Well, I think the second one
16 for a permanent, 10 for a portable. Yeah.
So do we know the answer to that, Ernest?
He's looking.
Okay.
I'm not finding a
So it's just part of whatever the PUD, whatever's approved is the PUD. Okay.
Well, no, wait a second. That's what I'm asking. Why would the PUD requirements overrule a city ordinance?
Because they do, anytime we pass a PUD, they have more control.
Is
Than
that
the-
true,
than the
Ernest?
city
I don't
has.
think that's true.
That's
I mean,
true.
that's why we go over all these details to make
That's
sure
right.
that the lot widths, the setbacks, everything that's part of this is totally different. And it's recorded with that plat and with that rezoning, so we know what it's gonna be. That's why I stand up here and do all this, so you know all that.
And it's
So
also-
it override.
It allows it to modify to what they want to use in the PUD document itself. I don't think it's, the term override is not there, it's what the PUD development plan allows.
And it also in a PUD, kind of the opposite direction is if, once it's approved, no waivers or variances are
Right.
allowed once the PUD is
Right.
approved. Whereas in a regular zoning, you could come back and ask for a variance.
Right.
For something.
And also, Ernest, can you see how the city would ever be able to enforce maintenance of the rain barrels?
Well, I honestly don't see it any different than how we enforce unsightly sanitary conditions right now. Probably would be complaint driven, to be quite honest with you. I don't think we're
How
gonna
do we do that? With citation?
Well, we do it with violation notices now for any other,
So they
give them
could
a
be
chance to
cited into
comply.
court for violation.
They could be, yes,
Same thing on the rain barrels.
yes. We don't want to cite anyone, we want
Well, I'm
compliance.
just asking you.
But that's how I would equate this. It would be no different than tall grass down the street. So probably complaint driven.
And Jeff, I can say, the goal is not to change any city standard or ordinance, and if it's more comfortable on it.
Hey, Larry, can you go to the mic?
I'm so sorry. I said the goal is not to change any city ordinance. If the desire is to keep it consistent with it when it comes to garages, we are happy to make that change. It just seemed to be on an accessory building, a 20-foot height, I think was just decided on as that's a reasonable height that will be lower than the house and would look consistent with it, so.
It's lower than a two-story house, but how many of them are gonna be two-story?
Yes, I think that depends on the,
I mean, I know, I've heard lots of complaints of 16-foot
Mhm.
accessory buildings. And I have to tell them, well, that's our ordinance.
well,
Mike can
This
attest to
says
that.
no garage door opening shall be taller than 20 feet in height. It doesn't say that the structure itself can't be taller than 20. It says no garage door opening shall be taller than 20 feet.
Okay, it
That's when
does.
you were asking that question. Is it the height of the structure itself? This is what this is the height of the.
So we don't have a height of a structure in this plan.
we are happy to incorporate that.
Well, I think you'd almost have to if you're telling me that our city ordinance doesn't apply.
Well, what I'm saying is the goal was not to get around, to end run
I
the
know,
city
but
ordinance.
there's just so many little things that, you know.
Yeah, and to echo that, Larry, I think we're gonna nitpick some things here, but the reason being, at least in my opinion, is that things are clearer this time around than they were last time, so I don't know, I may have some different questions now than I did last time, just because it's clear.
Let me just clarify. In all the residential zones, it sets height of accessory structures. We don't have that in the PUD section itself.
Right.
Maybe we need to go back and add that, but right now it's not there. Okay?
So I'll go back to my initial concern of this, once things were clarified. This might just be due to my lack of experience in this, but do we want a public street that far out there to maintain? And I mean, this is a question to the department heads that are here and anybody else on the council.
We've got one that this turns off of.
Doesn't have gravel shoulders.
Well, and it's also more public than this, I'd say.
But it was there when we
Yeah.
annexed it.
Right. But as far as being out there and getting to it, I don't see a difference.
But if we put in, if somebody put in a subdivision out there, which is very likely that may happen someday, I mean,
Mhm.
that's what happens.
Right.
If I can add one reminder, is that it's our decision. I'm not pushing this on planning. But for enforcement purposes, a PUD was recommended to us, particularly because of these enforcement issues. And so we ended up here because we have been trying to work cooperatively with the city to get a small subdivision that we think will contribute to Springdale. So that's how we ended where we are right now. We didn't start down this road so we could get our own little enclave that is completely outside of any standards that Springdale has set. We have tried to work with it, and in planning has been good. They've given us lots of comments, but we've tried to incorporate every comment they've given us. So I just want to remind people of that.
Well, and I'll take the credit or the blame for it to be a PUD, because I thought because of the uniqueness of the situation, we don't have any other subdivisions where people are moving in houses. How do we take care of that? This is one in the Karst area. We haven't dealt with that. It has some very unique situations. And in order to develop the best product for the developer and the city, I thought it was in everybody's best interest to do a PUD. That's why we're there today. I'll take the blame or the credit, whichever way you want to go.
And I appreciate Patsy saying, and I'm not trying to, it wasn't her decision, it was ours, but it was made at the recommendation of the city as well. And so the blame is not hers. The credit can be hers if that's necessary. I'm just pointing that out, that the goal of ending up where we are now is not to somehow be immune from other standards.
No,
me,
and I also think that in the future, you're going to be seeing more developments that aren't going to fit, that a PUD would be the best option for. Maybe a small, tiny house subdivision or something like that, in which doesn't fit with the regular standards that would be a PUD. So that really makes sense to me.
Let me just let everybody know that Mark Fugerus has been on the meeting via Zoom. Of course, Randall has been with us since the beginning, but Fugerus, again, is traveling. He's out west, and he has been with us for this whole discussion. I think he came on right before we got to this item. Mark, if can you hear me now still?
Yes, I can.
Okay, is there I checked with our city attorney. If there's a chance you have to get off Zoom, then you can call my cell phone and I'll put you on speaker. Uh, just,
Yes.
just so you can continue to hear the discussion. So I just want everybody to know. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So did we get any closure to the heights of the structure?
20 feet. That's what it is right now.
Larry, are you going to amend the document to say what it is in?
We will amend it to say whatever conforms with the existing standard on accessory structures and their height.
We can add that
And
to it.
then is that? I
So
mean,
what is that gonna be for everybody involved?
It's 16 feet for permanent and 10, or is it 10 or 12? 10 for
portable.
for portable ones. That's the standard every place else. Now, remember, once this is approved, if it's approved, they can't come back in their variance to come in and ask for a 18-foot, and we do see some of those a lot.
Right.
So 16 and 10. And that is the top, the very top of the structure.
This is Randall. I move the ordinance be adopted
I'll second
with
that.
that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance. I want to be sure and give you all any opportunity to speak. Council have any questions? Anyone in the room?
Do we have to clarify that it's the motions including these two amendments? Or I guess this one amendment to the PUD?
Is that including the amendments that were made tonight, Randall?
Correct.
Thank you.
I said that. I don't know if you heard me or not.
Okay, thanks. We have a resident that wants to speak. Go ahead,
Yeah,
sir.
Jeff Wolf, 8899 East Brown Road. My property is adjacent to the property that we've been talking about. Came here to talk about a couple of things, but I've been listening for the last hour, and it makes me nervous to listen to y'all talk about the things you're proposing because you're very unclear on what the consequences of your decision are going to be. Those are the consequences I'm going to have to live with because you guys can't make up your mind on what's right or wrong on the drainage, on the rain barrels. You quite frankly can't make up your mind on what the height of the structure should be. I've been a Springdale citizen for a while, and there's a lot of tax-paying citizens that would like to come to these meetings and hear some more factual content, and you guys be more confident in what needs to happen with these subdivisions. And I know you are because there's years of experience out there. We just got to drive around and look at it, and we see it. You guys live with it in your neighborhoods, but you're asking me to live with something that was an unknown. Well, I can't go anywhere and see a rain barrel in the city of Springdale for crying out loud. I don't see any rain barrels around City Hall for crying out loud.
I'm gonna tell you something right now,
Yeah.
just so you'll be clear.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
however I vote on this, if I even get to vote,
Okay.
I seldom get to vote.
Okay.
But the rain barrel is not part of my calculation at all.
Okay. Well,
Because
I don't
because
think-
I have calculations that didn't include the rain barrel.
that's just part of the equation, sir. I didn't say that was my main argument. That's just part of this whole equation. But again, the consequences of something that's getting ready approved here, and it doesn't sound like that any of the members of the city council have ever approved anything like this in the city. Am I right or wrong on that?
There are some things that are different, but I don't
Right.
necessarily
But again,
think.
so the consequences of those different things could directly affect me and my property value and whether my house floods or doesn't flood. And I think I have a right to voice those concerns, sir.
Absolutely,
And that's why I'm here.
absolutely. Well, you asked a question.
Yes, sir. And we've
I
talked
answered.
about the water
Yeah.
mitigation for a long time. And I really think we're putting the cart before the horse here. I think we're putting a subdivision in a place that can't handle there's no infrastructure there. And no one knows exactly what the cause and effect of that going to be. I know the engineers have said this isn't going to happen, but what if it does? Nobody can answer that question. I haven't heard it the last 3 times I've been to these. I haven't heard what the cause is going to be. We can say, yes, I think it's not going to do that. Well, yes, it could be 100-year rain. What if we get that tomorrow? Again, no one has talked about exactly what the consequences for the people that live in the community are going to be. We'd all talked about what the subdivisions can and can't be, what the streets can and can't be. But again, what are the consequences going to be for the people that live there? Because we don't know, and nobody here knows what needs to happen with the drainage necessarily. Is there going to be curb? I don't understand how in the world you all set up zoning rules and you can break them by a vote, by a city council vote. What good are the rules if you can just break them with a vote? You've got zoning rules and regulations that have been directly affected by the taxpayers, by city council people, by mayors, and you guys have all approved those. But how in the world do you just get around them by a vote and say, okay, we're going to change it today? What about the people that weren't able to change theirs prior, that had to spend the money for the correct engineering, the curbing, the drainage, the retention ponds, all of those things? What about those people? Should we all just do PUDs now? If you approve this, does that mean I can go out by 20 acres and do a PUD and get it approved? Or do I have to abide by what we have years and years of engineering, what all the other contractors and builders had to abide by? I guess that's my biggest question. If I was a builder and want to go develop some property at or near where I'm at, can I do the same thing and get away with it? Those are just questions that I think about, and I'm finished with that, but I appreciate y'all's time tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Todd Stevens, and, I just want to address a little bit of what Jeff is talking about, more so the content or the emotion than the content, I suppose. These decisions affect our lives. I know what Jeff has had to do to have that property there. He's been there many, many, many years, actually, to have that property there. I know what Jeff does, and he works a lot of hours to be able to pay for that property. Your decision is affecting that property. And so I understand the emotion behind his frustration. I live at 706 Paradise Place in Lowell, which is a private drive off of East Brown Road and across basically from the proposed subdivision.
Hello, my name is Heidi Franz. I live at 8730 East Brown Road in the Springdale city limits, just west of the proposed development. Once again, out of respect for your time, we are speaking on behalf of 23 neighbors who have signed opposition to this appeal. For the last 2 years, the city of Springdale has been caught in a debate between 23 landowners and a developer who is proposing an untested development design in Springdale, a design which includes pulling in old houses and remodeling them to create a rental subdivision in an area predominantly defined by large acreage, owner-occupied estates.
And honestly, I understand your position well, everybody's position that you're in here. I've got 35 years of experience working with and serving on various boards. But along the way, I've discovered a common thread that runs through valuable board members. First is a board member who's an expert in his field, in her field, and they're an expert in it when they vote on it. And this is due to their education and their experience and their credentials. For example, a CPA, a tax attorney, has the authority on their own credentials to make decisions based on their own opinion. If you're not an expert, the second type of an effective board member is one who becomes a diligent student of the topic at hand. This involves spending hours and hours and hours of research to understand every angle of what will be voted on. I'll tell you that I feel like Heidi and I have probably become students of this. Assuming one is not an expert or unable to devote the glut of hours needed to become a diligent student, I understand. We've got lives to live, right? The third type of superior decision maker relies upon input from viable sources, especially neutral parties. I've also witnessed a common mistake by boards. That's when decisions are influenced by a concept called the framing theory. And framing theory suggests that how something is presented influences the choices people make. In other words, partial information is presented and believed as being whole truth.
And the framing theory is not new. Professionals such as lawyers and engineers frame information in a way to support their client's agenda. Here are 5 examples of topics presented to you where partial information has been framed as whole truth.
And I'm a little intimidated, Mayor, because number one is rain barrels here, but may I?
Sure.
According to Scout Enterprises, Springdale approved the use of rain barrels for runoff mitigation as recently as 2019. That was in some of their latest presented material. Well, this is an example of something that's been framed. Rain barrels were approved in 2019, that's true. But according to the Springdale Engineering Department, this approval was for a small, single structure commercial building where the runoff was so minimal that mitigation was probably not going to be required by the city of Springdale. We were told that the cubic feet per second was substantially less than the amount figured on the Hawksview subdivision. The increase of cubic feet per second of runoff between the two broad projects was not at all comparable. And again, I'm talking from the city engineers department. Further, according to the Springdale Engineering Department's request for more information from Scout, and I quote, rain barrels are not included as mitigation in Springdale's LID manual because they are not consistent to be considered to be permanent structures or features in a way that a detention pond is permanent. If rain barrels are designed for mitigation, Scout Enterprises needs to provide calculations, details, and a maintenance plan. I think that's pretty clear from the engineering department. According to our contact with them, the engineering department this afternoon, number one, the calculations. Number two, the details, as they have said, that have been requested have not been provided.
Second is gravel driveways. Gravel driveways have been framed as a substantial mitigation, yet a properly installed gravel driveway is actually compacted or nearly impervious. If a gravel driveway is not properly installed, it's called a mud hole.
You know, and the third topic is what we're calling the remodeling piece. And in the last meeting, Scout Enterprises showed photographs of currently owned rental houses, and they framed these as moved-in houses as beautiful remodels. Oftentimes, though, the installed landscaping is not cared for, and the lawns are not always maintained. Remember, the lawns are not maintained by the same people that are going to be maintaining the rain barrels. Can we provide a photograph to you? Is that okay if we approach?
Sure,
Okay,
absolutely.
listen, okay. The photo at the top left is an image presented to you at the last meeting by Mr. McCready as an example of one of the beautiful remodels. The image at the bottom was taken this morning, today, of that same house.
Is this a POA? Are they under POA?
No.
Where they are said that they have to maintain this?
This is a structure that is not part of the POA. This is a structure that is I would call it a standalone rental right now.
Thank you.
But if it was in the city of Springdale, you just call and make a complaint if I'm not mistaken, and that would be addressed.
Right.
Yes.
And on that, is that gravel driveway, is it in good shape?
For a PUD or for a standalone individual?
There's a lot of gravel driveways out there in
Yes,
the
sir.
area. So I was just wondering if that was in pretty good shape, because it's the same individual that's gonna be building them.
Yeah, I would say that that is a pretty typical gravel driveway that you will see out in that area there, yes. And as far as in good shape, I'm not sure yet, or Brian, it's typical, let me say. Yeah, got grass in it, has got some wear in it. Yep. Heidi.
Number 4 is the Karst recharge area. Over the past 2 years, we've spent a great deal of time discussing the Karst recharge area. No matter your opinion on the subject, a greater portion of this land is included in the high vulnerability area. And the 20% increase in runoff to the north that this subdivision will create will end up in the extremely high vulnerability portion, the funnel area, which was specifically addressed at the last meeting. When talking about gravel, septic, runoff, there are rules for this area. Scout Enterprises has framed Karst to their advantage by choosing impervious gravel instead of using impervious pavement. They have chosen not to include a retention pond, bioswales, and other requirements in the Springdale ordinances stating that concentrated flow will harm the recharge area. Scout Enterprises has stated that the Karst Best Practice Manual provides guidance discouraging concentrated flow. Yet the city engineers of Springdale has quoted, and I quote, "We have been unable to find guidance from the United States Fish and Wildlife Services that discourages concentrated flow," end quote. In addition, our own personal study of the community growth best management practice for conservation of the Cave Springs Cave Recharge Zone reveals that there is an entire topic dedicated to stormwater detention basins in the Karst recharge area. And I quote, "In areas where sensitive karst features are identified or a stream corridor exists, which are the target of stormwater discharge, a stormwater detention basin should be constructed as a permanent on-site structure to allow for settling of contaminants."
Our last point is talking about the mitigation of water, and Scout Enterprises engineer and lawyer have framed over and over and over and over and over and over and over that the peak runoff will be 1/8 of an inch. According to the Springdale Engineering Department, the 1/8 of an inch is an irrelevant factor. An increase of runoff calculated as a percentage is a more appropriate representation. City Engineer Ryan Carr at the last meeting stated that according to the preliminary drainage report, the increase in runoff is actually 20%. 1/8 of an inch frames the impact honestly as inconsequential. It's little bitty tiny. Whereas a 20% increase more accurately represents the figures presented in the preliminary drainage report. Yet another example of making that taste better. 1/8 of an inch versus 20% of an increase. Mr. Gilbert's 640-foot wide and 1/8 of an inch deep stats in actuality equates to a 20% increase that immediately channelizes when it leaves the Scout Enterprises property. I've got to say that again. It immediately channelizes, and that's an engineering word, that water channelizes immediately upon removing, going beyond the property line. And it accumulates at what is called a choke point. That's another engineering term. I've become a student. That's the funnel area that I talked about last time. And we've identified and confirmed these things with the conversations that I've had with your own Springdale City Engineering Department. That water will channelize as soon as it comes off of that 640-foot wide property and end up, said a whole lot differently, right square in the middle of my water easement where my water lines today are hanging there. Again, that has nothing to do today with any houses that are going to be built up there. I fully understand that. But the concern here is that there will be an increase of water flow that the City of Springdale ordinance requires to be mitigated at 100% of that water flow. You can think that the existing damage that we have there now has nothing to do with the Scout properties. That is correct. The majority of our problem is coming from where? It's coming from Lowell, and I totally admit that. But the question is on mitigation is, are the proposed mitigation efforts that Scout Enterprises has proposed adequate to mitigate 100% of the increase in water flow? Now, let me take the numbers that we've talked about to the Springdale Drainage Criteria Manual, a set of ordinance protecting the city of Springdale and its residents. Please remember that according to this manual, and I'll repeat it again because this is super important, any development proposed in Springdale must mitigate 100% of their runoff to make sure flows don't exceed pre-development levels. 20% equates to approximately 30 to 55 gallons of water added per second, channelized to my funnel. Let me remind you that these figures are based on presumed calculations provided by Scout Enterprises' preliminary drainage report. How many rain barrels are planned to help mitigate the increase in runoff? As described earlier, and I keep going back to rain barrels because this is apparently one of their most utilized tools. As described earlier, no one knows because the engineering department has yet to receive the requested calculations from Scout Enterprise developers.
In a few moments, you may have an opportunity to vote on the rezoning PUD with waivers and variances. We invite you to honestly evaluate whether you are an expert in all areas presented: engineering, Karst, public works, ordinances. Have you truly spent the amount of hours to become wise students in all these areas? Or do you need to rely on the wisdom of those in the city of Springdale who have been hired to help you make wise decisions? We and the 23 neighbors we represent ask you to please do two things. Number one, please listen to your experts. Listen to those who are in position to wisely guide you without motives to frame the information. Listen to the specific concerns that have potential liability ramifications for our city. Please do not make your decision based upon framed, incomplete, and/or unconfirmed information. And number two, please follow the ordinances that have been created by the city of Springdale for the city of Springdale. During the drainage debate at the last meeting, Mr. Watson shared his concerns about additional runoff. He stated, and I quote, "If this were to get approved, this basically becomes our problem," end quote. I will repeat, your own city engineering department has confirmed it will create a 20% increase in runoff.
I'll close with Ms. Christie has said on many, many occasions regarding a PUD, with a yes vote, you are entering into a contract with Scout Enterprises. May I add, a forever contract with a developer who has a proven history of pushing for waivers, pushing for variances in an attempt to make an unconventional, highly disputed design fit. In the development plan, there's a quote that says, "By developing this property as a planned unit development, the neighbors may rest assured when it comes to what will be built on this property and the manner in which it will be built." Yet here we are in the 11th hour contemplating the final vote with missing details of critical concerns, not only concerns from the neighbors, but concerns from your very own engineering department Approving this proposal is making a decision to waive your own ordinances, knowingly ignoring that critical requested information has not yet been received by your own city engineering department. Are you sure that you want to hitch to this wagon? Because by the very nature of a PUD, your relationship with Scout Enterprises is just beginning.
We will end with this quote. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Thank you for hearing us and allowing us to have this conversation with you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
We're gonna take one more, and then we'll, I think the other side wants to answer too,
Sure.
and then we're gonna wrap this
Sure.
up.
I'm Jim Sykes. I live at 8828 East Brown Road, and I live just west of this development that's planned. The developer has 20 acres that joins my property. So this is going to be phase one. Phase two is coming. So that's something I want you to think about. I lived a lot of my time in Springdale, probably 30 years, and a lot of new developments, and nothing like this. You're going backwards if you approve this. Now, these are rent houses, half-acre lots, septic systems. How many people is going to be allowed to live in these rent houses? Is there a rule for that? 9, 10? These septic systems are based on how many people will live in there. So is that something that's in the PUD? That's a question.
I don't know if you're talking rhetorically or not.
Right, is there?
It's a 3-bedroom,
Right,
2-bath system.
right,
That's
but
what
how
they're
many people,
designing.
how many people can
The
live in there?
state sets those standards about how they're designed.
Right, but how, is there a limit to how many people, can 20 people live in there?
Not in the PUD, there's not. There may be in the Springdale ordinances.
We would have to address that, well, I'll let our city attorney speak to that, because we do have to deal sometimes with over occupancy.
So
It-
is there
it
something,
is-
this PUD's a specific thing, it's different than your city stuff, when I understand, so you're gonna have to be written in there if there's a
It's-
limit.
The use unit that is allowed is single-family dwellings, and a family is defined as no more than 4 persons unless everyone is related by blood or marriage.
Okay, so who's gonna control that? I know,
We control it all over the city right now.
well, is a PUD different or the same?
No, that's what they have in their
Okay.
PUD document, as that
Because I know,
permitted use.
you know, they got rent house next door to me, which,
In other
they were
words, it
good
could not
people,
be,
but they had-
could not be multifamily.
okay,
It's
But-
limited to single-family dwellings.
okay, I'm just wondering who's gonna control that.
It's the same as we do all over
Yeah.
the city.
To be honest, we have to count, I mean, a lot of that is complaint driven, it has to be, because we can't
Okay,
know what's going on in every house, but,
Okay.
but if a complaint is brought to us, we will check it out.
I just know a septic
Yeah.
system can handle so many
Right.
people, so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
While you're coming up here, I want to address something from an objective standpoint to everyone here. Going off what the mayor said, so this is, complaint driven as far as how the city can help. And this applies to any neighborhood in the city. So one, the PUD is part of an ordinance. It's sort of an exception to ordinance requirements, but it's still part of our ordinances. So I don't want that to get confused. This isn't a individual community out there on their own, like a sovereign island. And I don't want y'all to think of it that way. Because you can, with this being a public street, go on there, drive around. I don't encourage y'all to go in there and agitate anybody, but you can drive around and report some issues, as you can in any other neighborhood. And I don't want to go down the list as to what complaints you can have, but, this grass, you can report that, and city neighborhood services would go out there and address the issue. I'm assuming you can do the same with the rain barrels without trespassing. So again, there's, in my opinion, the same checks and balances or similar in this neighborhood as it would be with other ones.
Go ahead, David.
My name is David Gilbert. I live at 5714 Walden Street in Springdale. I am the engineer of record for this project employed by Scout Enterprises. I have been a registered professional engineer since 1994. I have been in engineering practice in Northwest Arkansas since 1989. I spent 6.5 years in college and university taking the coursework to prepare me for my profession. I am not a book-learned person. I am not a studied expert who got that way by reading a few magazine articles. I have a state license authorizing me to practice professional engineering. Without that license, if I practiced professional engineering, I would be censured, fined. I don't think you can be jailed for it, but boy, you can run up some big fat fines for doing it. It is illegal for me in any state where I am not licensed to even say that I am an engineer. I can say that in Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Texas. If I go to Florida, I cannot say that I am an engineer because I am not licensed in that state. Among the requirements for me to have a professional engineering license is that my first obligation by statute is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. That comes before everything else. It would be a violation of my license, punishable by revocation and fine, for me to knowingly harm the public health, safety, and welfare. My second obligation is to represent my client to the best of my ability. That's in the statutes. Now, I understand we may have disagreements, especially among professional engineers, such as Mr. Baldwin. Ryan, I'm sorry, are you licensed? Okay. And Ms. Hollingshead. We may have disagreements on the best approach to do things. However, none of us are out to harm the public health, safety, or welfare. I respect their opinions. They are opinions. They are your people. They're your staff, and you need to lean on them and listen to them. I suspect if we want to talk about framing, that much framing has been done here tonight. For one issue, Mr. Stevens continues to quote from the first version of the drainage report. There have been 2 submitted, 3 developed. Only the first mentions concentration in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife regulations, and that was my fault. I thought it was in those. It's not in those. It's in the Northwest Arkansas Best Management Practices, which were adopted by multiple jurisdictions in Northwest Arkansas, including the city of Springdale. I'm sorry, I quoted the wrong book to start with. Can we put that down and not keep saying it's not in there, because you're right, it's not in there, it's over here in a different place. That's one thing. The issue of whether it's 1/8 of an inch or not is relevant. Mr. Stevens' statement is that the water immediately upon leaving the Scout Enterprises property is channelized, and that is a false statement. Water maintains its spread flow at least halfway through the adjacent lots, well down toward Brown Road. So it is not a correct statement to say that it's channelized immediately. One of the things we're trying to do is avoid channelizing it. If you put in a detention pond, you've got one point where the water goes out. Which one of you neighbors wants that water to all go onto your property? I wouldn't if it was me. I surely wouldn't if it was me. It's much better if it's kept spread out. Many of the decisions in this design are factors in that. Why do we not want to do curb and gutter? Because curb and gutter, by its design, channelizes the water. Why do we not want to do sodded swales beside the roadway? Because sodded swales' entire purpose is to channelize water.
The whole objective is to keep this spread out. Now, we can talk about, well, we need a detention pond to make the water slow down and settle the solids out. How does the solids settle out any better in a pond than spread out over 640 feet of width running through the grass? That's what we're looking at here. So we're not trying to get around anything. I'd like to remind you that the roadway section that we have so much controversy over is allowed by your code. I didn't write your code, you did. If you don't want that roadway section built anywhere in Springdale, maybe you ought to consider changing the code so it's not allowed. But the fact of the matter, it is allowed. And we are permitted to rely on what's contained in the code. If the code says it can legally be done, and it's very specific, it says if you meet these 4 criteria, which we do, you may do this section if you want to. I didn't invent this. It's in your code. Now, the idea that we don't want to do the swales is a deviation from what's in your code. I'll grant you that. A lot of time has been spent on the rain barrels and the fact that the calculations haven't been completed yet. You can put that one on me too. In my conversation with Mr. Baldwin, I understood him to say, and perhaps I misunderstood, but I understood him to say that detailed calculations on the rain barrels were not required at this point. And the reason that makes sense is because this is the preliminary drainage report. We've got another layer of approvals to go through if this is approved tonight. We have not entered we've just barely dipped our toe into the construction drawings phase where we have to show street profiles, all the grades, all the utilities, all of everything, roadway sections, and a final drainage report, which has to be reviewed and approved by the staff. I promise you, if this gets approved tonight, whether anybody wants them or not, the rain barrel calculations are going to be in that report because I'm going to put them in there. We have calculated, I've done some preliminary work on it, getting familiar with the calculations based on the earlier project that was approved. And yes, it was for a smaller structure, a 1,500 square foot structure that it was determined by that engineer that two 275 gallon rain barrels, totes if you will, you probably put diesel fuel in them before, they're the wire cage plastic totes, that 2 of those would handle 1,500 square feet. My calculations show they're good for about 800 square feet apiece. So the answer to the question of how many rain barrels are we going to have depends on how big the floors are. If you have a 1,000 square foot house, you're going to have 2. At 2,000 square feet takes 3. 3,000 square feet takes 4. 4,000 square feet takes 5 or 6. But this can all be done and designed so that the runoff is mitigated so that it will not increase. It's not fair to say because you're not doing a grass bottom, concrete lined, sod filtered detention basin with a giant concrete structure in it, nothing else works. That's a very narrow view. There are lots of things that work. There are 5 or 6 ways to do anything that I do. And we think this is a good one. We appreciate your time. I just wanted to put to rest some of the issues, especially about the drainage report. We're getting there.
Thank you,
And we
Dave.
do have another round of approval to go.
All right.
Thank
We've gone a long time. We've got a motion and a second. I'm going to call for the vote.
Boudreaux,
He just popped up, so.
Did you hear us, Mark? Denise is calling.
Yes.
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Watson, My vote is yes.
We got you. Thank you.
Overton, Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Carry 6-2 does have an emergency clause.
Move the merge clause be adopted.
Second.
Howe,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Watson, Overton,
No.
Lawson,
Yes, ma'am.
Flores,
Yes, ma'am.
Harriman,
Yes, ma'am.
Fugierus,
Try it again, Mark. We have 6.
We got 6 of that.
Okay.
yes.
We needed 6, we got 6. Hey, Mark.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And we will move on to the next item, which really is, let's see, it's something we don't have to decide tonight. But I want you to be thinking about it. The next, not next committee meeting next week, but the first committee meeting in July, the dates would be July 4th. And I know we're not going to do that. Next night is planning commission, so check your calendars for the Wednesday night of that week and see if that'll work for you. For the first committee meeting in July. So, and we can talk about it again at committee next week. Okay? Does anybody have anything else? I don't. No one has anything
So
else?
moved.
Okay, there's a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned. Thank you.